there, Shawna Karrasch here with an Ask Shawna answer. Okay, this one comes from Nadia, and Nadia said, "Hi, I was just wondering, what is your view on pressure and release training as used in Pirelli? I clicker train my pony, but although he does what I tell him, he also does this in his own time. Do you think it would be a good idea to mix some pressure release with clicker training to make my pony more inclined to do things as soon as I give him the cue? For example, if I want him to stop, I could say whoa, as well as put pressure on the halter. And when he stops, I release the pressure and click and treat too. What is your opinion of this? Thank you." Okay, Nadia, well, you've kind of tapped into a big, a debate point for a lot of people. And my general principle, I mean, it's been proven that positive reinforcement is more effective than the pressure release, which is also known as negative reinforcement, is true negative reinforcement. So it is much more effective for a lot of reasons, and it has, so what I would do, instead of thinking immediately I need to add pressure release to this, the first thing I would try is there's some elements of the positive reinforcement with the timing and changing some things a little bit that I think are going to be more effective for your relationship, as well as for your horse's attitude and his spontaneity and getting him doing things a little more readily without such latency in between. So what I would recommend you do, so my opinion, okay, I kind of avoided one question and I didn't mean to. So my opinion is, I have worked with lots and lots of people who use pressure and release training. I mean, I work with professionals who are in the Olympics. They're not canning everything they know to go completely positive reinforcement, but they're learning to incorporate the two things together. But I have to point out, they are extremely good and soft trainers who are very, very good at the pressure and release, and it's very, very soft in what they do typically. So the two can work together, but there's certain situations, if I feel like there's an issue with something that hasn't worked through the negative reinforcement through the pressure release, to add more pressure release only makes it worse. It doesn't make it better. There's oftentimes situations, if the horse has been pretty comfortable with it and gone along pretty good, I will say, okay, we can, kind of add the two together. And what I often find people do is that people will start recognizing how much more effective the positive reinforcement is, and they start dropping a lot of the pressure release and incorporating a whole lot more of the positive reinforcement. But then there are situations where people will come to me and say, I have a problem with this, and I'll have to say, we got to drop that thing altogether and start anew with it, because it's become such a sour point for the horse. So it really is an individual basis based on the horse's history, us and our history, and it's the amount of, I want very little pressure release if I can. If pressure release isn't working so effectively, I really don't incorporate more of it. So I think that pressure release isn't a bad guy altogether, but it is getting people to gauge that, because when people are really used to using negative reinforcement, pressure release training, their degree of what isn't much pressure is not my degree of what isn't much pressure. So it's hard because it's relative to the people and the horse, and the horses are the ones who tell us what they like and what they don't like. I mean, I've seen horses that have been downright, that people have used quite a bit of pressure. The horse hardly knows they're there. And then a horse you can tap ever so slightly and they're twitching and uncomfortable with it. So really they're the ones to gauge it. So there's some efficacy there. People have had some progress there with the pressure release, and it's helped some people to kind of open up their thinking. But when you really start learning and implementing the positive reinforcement, you're going to find it's way more effective, and there's ways to tweak it, to modify it for our particular horse or situation, that will make it way more effective than utilizing more pressure release. But I'm not opposed to it. So that's kind of it's a case per case basis. So you can use it. Some people can use it more effectively than others, and some people are not. So sometimes putting the two together can actually be kind of a catastrophe. So because it can be very conflicting for the horses, they're not understand. It's almost like having a volatile parent that you don't know, are they going to be, it's almost like having an alcoholic parent, that maybe you don't know that, but they're they can be hot or cold and you don't know what you're going to get. So you're kind of just step back from all of it so it can keep some distance there because of the inconsistency and the, I don't know what I'm going to get today. So some of that there can be some issues with that too. So it is really a case by case basis if you ask me, and it depending on the horse and the person, the history and the whole thing. But anyway, in your situation, what I'm thinking what is going to be, I have some things that I think are going to help you quite a bit. So one of the things I recommend you do is when I feel like, or when I come across horses, and sometimes I come across them, like they've always been kind of like within this realm. You come across one and you're like, you're just a little different. And so I have to change it up and think, well, what can I do differently to get this guy in that good mental place where he's there, he's ready, he wants to do it, but he's calm and he's relaxed and happy. And so those are things that we can do. So in your situation, when I feel like when I'm seeing horses that are slow to respond to things, there's a couple things that I tend to find are factors that have come into play with people. One is we've gone too long with the sessions. So the sessions have kind of gone on and on and on. So everything's kind of a little duller, not quite so spunky and fun. And so, or spunky's not a good word in the UK, is it? Okay, let's erase that. Things aren't quite so fun, and that's not a bad word here. So anyway, so so they aren't quite as enthralled by the training, let's say. They're not quite so into it and happy about it. So a couple of things happen. One is I will tell people and get people to, one, make sure we're not raising the criteria too high, that they know and they're very clear about what we're asking. I keep the sessions, I'll make the sessions very short and very sweet for a while. And when I say sweet, I mean highly reinforcing. So I'd ask them for 1 or 2 approximations, give them lots of food for it. So they're like, oh, well, that was really fun. That was really good. So what I would do to start and initiate this process, because it's really the attitude you're trying to change. It's not the specific behavior. It sounds like there's an attitude associated with it, kind of a work ethic, as it were. So in order to change it, we need to change how he feels about the training. So what I would do is take a behavior that he is quite eager and readily offers. Okay, so you take something like, let's say he lifts his feet quite easily, or he goes to his target quite easily, goes to a stationary target quite easily. So take something that he tends to do with some exuberance and ask him to do it. As he leaves to leave that behavior, click that attitude, not the completion of the behavior, click the initiation of the behavior. Early bridges, early clicks are phenomenal for changing energy, attitude, and enthusiasm for the training. So something that you know he's going to do quite readily, and you ask him to do it and he heads off, click and reinforce that a lot, feed him all of it, and let that be. So catching that by utilizing a lot more of those early bridges, clicking intent, when you see he's making a commitment to do it, click that moment in time. And he'll start to be like, okay, well, if I try harder, quicker, sooner, I just may get reinforced for it. And making it really short and sweet and easy will really kind of energize him about the attitude about it and how much he wants to do it and looks forward to it. So I think those things are going to help you. Also, another thing that we really have a tendency to do is, okay, so early bridges, but it's kind of along the same lines, is like I'll use a target to teach him to do something. Well, people oftentimes only click when he touches the target. Well, actually, the target was just to generate the behavior. So clicking as he leaves to go to the target actually is very good and effective tool in keeping that energy up, and that it's still an early bridge essentially, but trying just to remind us that we're fading the target out anyway, most likely, but just going to it is really the action we're looking for. And keeping in mind, when they make a decision to do something and we draw attention to that decision, we're training their heads, which really is what we're training. So when you see them go, okay, I'm going to go, and you click that thought process and that decision to go, you're drawing a lot of attention to that kind of attitude. So I think just changing up your timing there will help you quite a bit in getting your guy to shorten up the latency and those things. Now, if you do see something that takes a while for him to do, I would stand quietly for a few seconds, or a second or two, and just kind of say, yeah, I saw that you didn't do it. So let him, even if he finishes a behavior, if it took him a little bit to do it, you need to kind of start setting your boundaries and your criteria. And criteria at first is going to be lower, but as things get better, we should be raising criteria. If we're not kind of raising the criteria till we get it where we want it, they'll get kind of complacent about things. But as we shift it, move on to other things, learning more than one thing at a time, not things that would conflict and be confusing. Like you don't want to teach them to lift his leg for the farrier and then to do a Spanish walk, because your farrier will hate you. But you want to instead teach them something that's different, but you can mix it up within the session, and that's also really good for that enthusiasm and that energy in looking forward to the session and keep him on his toes a little bit. But I think that you'll start to change that up a little bit as you add more in there and keep it brighter and moving forward. You'll start to see a little more, you'll see a better attitude. But if he doesn't do it, let's say he takes, now he's going back to a really slow one, and this is normal. They try the wrong thing. It's part of the learning process sometimes. So if he goes back to the old way he did it when you're making progress, and he goes off and he does the behavior, but he did it kind of slow in the beginning, you are not obligated to click that. You need to set those boundaries and say, well, our criteria has shifted, and I know you can do it better than that, and that really wasn't up to criteria. So I just give them a, a second, 2-second pause and say, yeah, I saw what you did. That wasn't correct. Can we try it again or do something else? But and I imagine by making it clear and say, I'm just not going to feed the slower ones, but I will feed the ones, or click and feed the ones that you try, you'll start to see that. So just set that criteria and those boundaries as you go too. But you need to set them up for success in the beginning, because he won't understand it if you just start saying, I'm not going to feed you for that. You need to kind of help him get some success, do what you can to get the success, and start shaping it until he gets the idea of the new criteria. All right. Well, I hope that helps you, Nadia. That was a good question. There was a lot of info in that question, or a lot of parts of that one. All right. So if you or anybody else has more questions or needs a little more advice or wants a little bit more input for that, just holler. Don't hesitate to get a hold of me at askshawna.com or at shawnakarrasch.com. Until next time, enjoy getting your horse on target. Bye.